So before we get into these tools, I just want to talk a little about graphics tablets and the extra control they give you. I've got my mouse in my hand and I've got a new scene here. Let me just turn off this symmetry. If I was to using the draw tool, we'll talk about the draw tool in a minute. Draw a line down here. Okay, I'm gonna now pick up the pen rather than my mouse and come to the other side. And what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm just going to make a very light pressure stroke. Okay, you can see it's much lighter than this one, but if I press hard on my pen, I can get a much bigger or stronger stroke. Okay, so that is the main advantage of pen, is it's pressure sensitive, and if we look at our tools here, we can turn the pressure sensitivity on and off on the radius and the strength, and I believe also on the smoothing. Okay, so what does that leave us? Control Z, not Shift Z. It means that we could have much finer control over what we're doing. Control Z backwards. Let's go up a bit here. So that's with the strength, and let's go to a top view here, and let me turn this right the way down. And the other thing is, if I turn my pen upside down, it'll invert the stroke rather than let's do a bigger stroke here. It'll invert the stroke instead of pressing the plus and the minus buttons up here. Okay, so I can go softly. Let's turn the strength is too high. Let's go backwards a couple of steps. So with my pen, let's just make this a bit smaller, somewhere about there. You can see already that it's made a little bit of a, but I can do some very kind of gentle strokes and start to build up what I'm looking for. Okay, then if I press harder with my pen, I can get that difference. So that, coupled with turning the pen upside down to invert the strokes, can give you a lot more control in your workflow, whatever suits. Okay, so for now, I'm going to use my mouse, put my pen down, because most of you won't have graphics pens. I know a few of them have got graphics tablets stuck in a drawer somewhere and never use them. Blender is the ideal opportunity to learn it and use it. But let's talk about these brushes. The first brush is the draw brush, and with a lot of these brushes, if we look over in our tool tab, we can kind of see the image that's used or the effect we get. Some of them look the same. For example, if I look at clay, well, not clay, let's look at blobs, and I think there's another one down here uses the same kind of, and I'm not going to be able to find it. That's blobs. That's clay blobs, and that's blobs. I'm not find it, but I'm sure there was. Anyway, if we look at this image over here, we kind of get an idea of what's going to happen. So let me just draw this out so we can see the names of these tools. And with the draw, it's basically just rising up this hump. But we also have a draw sharp, which will bring it to more of a peak. I'm sure you can see that there. Rather than rounded, it's more peaked. Let me just smooth that out. Right, so the clay is adding this kind of little lump of material. This will be good for kind of building up areas ready to do further operations on. But as you can see, it's kind of lumpy and uneven. So, you know, that'd be good then for a smoothing operation afterwards. Might help a little if I turn these wireframe on so you can see the geometry. Well, I think we'll switch between it on and off as we need it. Okay, let's move this out again. Clay strips is one that I use quite a bit, and it kind of builds it up in strips. Now what you're going to find, or what I find anyway, is I generally only use about 4 or 5 of these regularly. Maybe another 3 or 4 occasionally, and the rest I never use. It depends, you know, how you learn the tools and how you develop your workflow onwards. But anyway, clay strips, probably better without the overlays or the wireframe. Let's control backwards. It's building up the material, it's raising material in this kind of like strips pattern. So once again, it's good for building up an area where you could then go in and maybe smooth it a bit. Okay, so it's to adding material really. Clay thumb, well, let's do a clay strips again. That'll be easier to see. Clay thumb is like pushing your thumb in the clay and moving geometry around. So let me kind of do that here. You don't really see much, so let's turn on these overlays again, this wireframe. You can see how it's making like a thumb indent and pushing material and spreading it around. So you can see here from the grid lines how it's doing that. Right, let's turn these overlays off. Layer is building up. It's a bit like the clay strips, except clay strips is kind of rough and ready, where layer looks like it's going to lay kind of hard edge strips. So it's not that dissimilar from the draw really, is it? Very similar in fact. Where were we? Clay strips, layer. Inflate or just inflate as a blob. You need to move your mouse around to get this. I'm moving it around in circles. And if we look at the overlays on that now, you can see how it's just inflating that up. Blob will add, let's go a bit bigger on this. A bit like the inflate, but it's adding kind of extra material at different sizes kind of thing. Once again, it's a tool you'd use for building up. Okay, I'll leave this here for the moment while we look at crease. What crease will do is it will pinch kind of the geometry together into a valley. So let's add a crease down here. And you can see how it's starting to crease that together. Okay. Smoothing, we've already looked at. Smoothing is kind of to smooth out some geometry you've already done and flatten it and smooth it and things like that. Flatten will flatten pretty much along where you start. That will be your starting plane, and it'll try and flatten towards that plane This was actually a big area, so let's make this brush big. And see now how it's trying to flatten that out. Okay. Fill. Let's use draw again for a minute. Let's turn that brush strength down with my F key. Let's put 2 here. The job of fill really is to try and fill in between 2 areas. Okay, so if I start to fill across, and down, we're just building up where that valley was there. Okay, which you could then come back in with your smooth brush. Let's make and kind of smooth that down as you'd want it. Flatten, we talked about, fill, scrape. Okay, let's do some clay strips here for a minute. Kind of build that material area up. Okay, so scrape should really kind of scrape a flat in there. Let me increase this brush size a bit. Let's increase the strength. Not showing too well here. And actually needs quite a bit of wonder how that'll work with my pen. Let me just pick up my pen a minute. And you can see how it's slowly kind of scraping in this area over here. It doesn't help us. But yeah, if we look over here, it's just kind of like using a scraper on top of clay to kind of scrape, and as if you were plastering something smooth. Okay, multiplane I've never used before. Let's see what that does. And once again, I'm using my mouse. It's actually multiplane scrape. Okay, that's why I wasn't. So it's similar to scrape, and these are one of the ones I was looking at, where if you look at the kind of the brush sample, they're the same. So it looks like multiplane may do it just over a kind of a wider area. I'm not too sure. Pinch should really pinch geometry together. So let's go in this area here. You see how it's drawing the 2 sides together almost like a crease. Okay, grab will kind of grab geometry, and you can move it up that way. It doesn't do a great job. It's probably something you'd use in small increments rather than making big, bold gestures like that. Elastic deform is similar to a grab, but oh my, very, very sensitive and big. Let's turn that strength down. That's the radius. Shift F. Let's turn that strength down. Basically just pushing geometry around as you need it. Snake hook is always a bad one. The reason being, snake hook does a similar kind of thing, But when you start to go off whatever direction you were, it starts to really mess things up. So for example, if I was going to come straight up here, that's fine. Okay, if I come straight up and then off to the left, it's not taking all the geometry, it's leaving some behind. We're getting these very kind of jagged things. Not very good at all. Thumb's going to be similar to the clay thumb. Although the picture is a lot different. But it's basically just kind of thumbing geometry around as if you were sticking your thumb in the clay. Let's make that bigger. And let's see what our kind of force is. So you can see how I can start to nudge and draw geometry over. Okay, pose is used for moving parts of geometry. What it's supposed to do is, if you're sculpting a character, say, you should be able to use pose to, say, move an arm or a finger or something like that. Let's try this here. So you can see how it's just kind of moving. It's unless you're doing character creation, it's not much use for it. Nudge. Okay, let's turn this up a bit. It's just basically nudging your geometry around. So it's a very similar tool to the kind of the thumb, whatever. Rotate, however, we'll kind of swirl it around the center of the brush. And slide relax will kind of, let's come down here for slide relax. If we watch the geometry here, slide relax will keep the shape, but kind of moves the geometry while keeping the shape is the best way to explain that. So let's go with a bigger brush, and let's go. So if you watch, the shape here will remain the same, but the geometry kind of slides down and moves, relaxes down it. Okay, so if you were doing something where you needed more of your geometry down here and you didn't need so much up here, but you had the shape you wanted, you could start to draw some of that geometry down over that shape towards where you needed it. Okay, cloth, the one everyone's been waiting for. Let's just go to object mode for a second. Let me delete this plane. Let me add another. We'll start with a fresh plane. Scale it up. Go into edit mode. Let's subdivide it. And let's go with 100. Cuts. Let's go back into sculpt mode. Okay, cloth. This is the one everyone's been talking about. We've got a cloth brush here. Let me just turn the size up a bit. Not that much. Somewhere about there. And let's just reduce this to around about 0.7, somewhere around there. Cloth, when you draw down, cloth is for making wrinkles. Let me just for a moment shake that smooth. It's for making wrinkles, okay? It's not like a cloth simulation where it will hang down over anything. It's for adding extra wrinkles. Okay, but it can be a little bit uncontrollable. So I find with cloth you're better off working in small steps, just gently moving stuff to how you want it. So let's Control Z back a couple of times. Let's draw some wrinkles into the middle. That's probably too much for what I wanted. Let's check the size, not the size. Let's just gently draw that in a little. Okay, it doesn't seem to be working now. I think my brush is too big for the workpiece that I'm on. I've probably lost my subdivision there, have I? No, I haven't. Okay, oh, because I'm on smooth, how did I get there? Let's go back to cloth. So you see where I went too far there, it quickly built up. Okay, so what I might have to do is just come in a bit softer here. And gently build up the wrinkle I was looking for. And move it around. Let's turn these overlays off. Okay, let's go to layout for a minute. Shade that smooth. Let's come back to sculpting. That really what it is about cloth. But one thing I did notice about cloth is if we go into advanced, I believe it is. Was it stroke? I think it's advanced, it's area plane. If we change that to view plane, it'll kind of sculpt along the view we're looking at. Whereas if I change that to area plane, oh no, I'm not seeing a big lot of difference there. But anyway, that's the way a cloth brush is used, is to gently build up these wrinkles. Do whatever you want with it. So maybe a test for that would be our bed file. Let's open recent. It's not safe. Nope. I'll open recent. What was week 20? Okay. So what I found also is it doesn't work great with bloody dog. It doesn't work great with solidified geometry, but it can work. So let me select this mattress. Let's go into sculpting. Okay, let's choose our cloth brush. And we could add some subtle wrinkles onto the bed. I probably went too far with that one. Control Z backwards. Let's try a bit of a bigger brush. There, I went too far, I pulled that in. But okay, that's a good thing because we also have a mask down here. What I can do with mask is I can paint areas that I don't want affected. Okay, so now if I come back to the cloth brush, I'll try to pull this in. This blackened geometry won't be affected. So no matter how much I do there, it's not going to move. Okay, to get rid of the mask, you simply invert or press the shift button. Control, no, you need to invert the mask. And now I've forgotten it because I'm on cloth. Let's go back to mask. Shift button to unpaint it, as it were. So now if I went back to the cloth, I should be able to pull more of this in. Okay. Let's Control Z backwards a couple of times here. So we've got a nice flat bed. So With this cloth, nice big brush here, I could just kind of start to pull in some subtle wrinkles in this bed. I know we did this with a normal map, but this can also help as well. There, see, that's looking nice, that's looking more natural. We could do the same here. Let's do it up here somewhere. Oh, because that piece isn't selected. So let's go to object mode, select that, sculpt mode again, and start to add some of that here. So it's giving us a more kind of natural look and effect on that. So, for example, we went to... Wow, that's a bright... Let's come back to solid view. Let's go back to layout. Let's see that a little bit better. And let's use a matte cap on this, and let's just kind of like a clay. There you go. You can see the effects that we're getting there, and we get a much more kind of natural look on the bed covers there. I mean, we could do the same with the pillow. So let's grab a pillow here. Let's go into sculpted mode. Add in some wrinkles along that pillow. And that's really what the sculpt brush is, or the cloth brush is for. It's for adding wrinkles. It's not a magical tool that's going to make clothes for you in 2 clicks. It's just purely for adding wrinkles. Okay, so that's a mask. The recipes we can leave out for the moment. Box mask and box hide. Box masks. Okay, so for example, we were working on the pillow, weren't we? So let's go back and select this, turn down again, back to sculpting. We could use a box mask to mask this area. Then use the cloth brush. And it's not going to affect this area, it's masking off this area. Okay. So box hide lets you hide some geometry. So let's go back to box mask and let's shift. No, let's go to the mask tool then and shift to clear this mask. Okay, so you can see the uses for the cloth brush here, and this is the one that everyone's been raving about on the internet. It has its uses. It's not a magical tool for making everything, but it is a very useful tool.